I just have to say this because I can't stop thinking about it, so I have to say it out loud, then I'll stop. So this morning I had my grandkids with me on the way to church, and our thing we do every Sunday is we try to get out of the house on time so we can go get McDonald's. So we went through McDonald's. I have the little app on my phone. This is totally a commercial for them, right? So I have the app, so I get a 99 cents premium coffee, any size I want. So of course you don't go small, you go big when you get a deal, right? Am I right? Got the large vanilla sugar-free iced coffee. So kids are set. I'm like, okay, we're running tight on time. Everybody's gonna eat while we're driving, right? So they're good. Got the orange juice, everything's where it needs to be. We're driving, I'm at the red light, and I grab my iced coffee. I didn't even get it to my mouth, and I feel dribbles down the front of my white shirt that I chose to wear today. So I have dots, so if you're seeing colors, it's not your eyes, it is actually my shirt. So next time you see me wear this, it will either be white because I got the stain out, or I just dyed the whole thing brown so that it matches, right? So there, I said it, it's out there. Yes, I'm messy. So here we go. I was 5 years old, maybe 4 years old. I didn't get a hold of my sister to confirm, but I can remember that because my sister is just a little less than 2 years younger than me. She was in a stroller. And I'm assuming, I see in my mind, I don't even know where my mom is, but I'm assuming she's pushing the stroller because my dad has my hand. And we're at the Milwaukee Zoo. And we're walking, and I hear a noise I had never heard before. This noise was so loud, it reverberated within my little personhood. My whole body was shaking, and I'm like, Daddy, what was that? And he's like, that's a lion. I'm like, wow. Now, my sister was crying in the stroller. I saw other kids running the other direction, like they were scared. And I look at my dad, I'm like, why does it do that? And he tells me, they just want to let you know he's awake. I'm like, cool, let's go see him, right? I'm like, I'm on hunt for the lion because I want to know who and what can make such a loud noise like that. Now, through the research I was doing, because I looked it up, because there's things that you hear growing up, and you're like, you just assume they're true, but I have now come to learn with Google that I don't really know as much as I think I do. So I actually looked it up, and it said that it was true, that a roar of a lion with the right conditions can be heard up to 5 miles away. That's how loud it is. Now, when Michael first learned to play drums, he played drums today. Yay, Michael. In the church stage that we were performing on, that we were singing on, we didn't have a drum shield. And Michael was a fan of music with a lot of drumming. And so it was loud. Okay, so loud that like my ears would be ringing. But the other singers would be like, I can't stand, like, hey, that's my son. I'll stand right next to those drums and hear them ring. You know what? Sometimes we hear sounds and we may not understand what it is and where it's coming from, but there is a residual effect even as you walk away from that sound. So, okay, going back, I passed all that. My sister was crying, people were running. There we are. Okay. So, there are so many things that are fighting for your attention, especially in today's culture, right? I mean, I pick up my phone and I have notifications, not just from Church Center, which I'm really grateful because sometimes people post prayer requests and I like to keep up and be actually involved and pray for those things. But also, there's Facebook, and there's Instagram. I signed up for LinkedIn. Who knew so many people might want to hire me? I don't know. I've got like all these notifications coming in all the time. Now, what about the millions of dollars that are actually paid to people, personalities, or corporations to try and keep your attention even for 1 minute? The millions of dollars for one commercial of Doritos during Super Bowl to get your attention. But immediately, as soon as I said that, you know what I was talking about. It worked. They're millions of dollars, right? Well, in the spiritual realm, there is also a fight for your attention. See, we operate and we live in what we can see and what our senses tell us, but I want to relay to you and maybe pull back the covers a little bit that there is a spiritual realm that in which we live in that we don't see with our physical eyes, but is just as real as what we see every day. We talk about and we sing about an almighty God, the creator, the one who loves you, that sacrificed his own son to have relationship with you, to restore the goodness that he created you for. And we sing about those things, but just as real, there is an enemy, there is a foe that is out to destroy you. In John chapter 10, Jesus' own words said that there is a thief that comes to kill, steal, and destroy. There is a very real fight for the wellness of your soul. Now, whether you want to give him a name or you think the devil sounds funny, or some of you might have heard about Lucifer as another word that they use, but I'm just going to call him today evil. For the lack of any other big word and without getting into theological debates about any of it, I'm just going to call it evil. But there is a fight for your soul and for the attention of your thoughts. I wanted to relay this to you, and I'm really trying to hear God as I talk about this, because here's my goal in my heart. I do not want to instill fear into any single person, because God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. That is not God. And if you deal with fear on the regular basis, there is relief from that fear, because God doesn't want you to live in that. So here's a shameless plug. September 22nd and 23rd is Freedom Weekend. If you haven't gone, or maybe you went a year, 2 years ago, and you need a refreshing, fear is starting to take a grip one more time, I would say get to that group. But I'm jumping way ahead. That's not even in my notes yet. So let's get back here. Okay. Thank you, Lord. Okay. Now, the other thing is that there's extremes. When we talk about the enemy of our soul, that sometimes there's an extreme of what we go to that I've heard growing up. When I don't want to say how old I was, but I was really young. And there was a guy, now they've made a meme of him, but his thing was all the time, the devil made me do it. The devil made me do it. As if there was an excuse for my actions and what I chose to do because, the devil made me do it. Not biblical in any way. The Bible says that we're drawn into sin and drawn away from God by our own desires and the things that go on inside of us. Devil just has the power to offer it, right?
That's good.
It's available, but it's really, the choice is yours. So the devil can't make us do it. But then there's the other extreme that everything that happens is, that's the devil. That's demons. That's evil. Let me put up garlic because somehow or another garlic's going to scare away evil stuff. I don't know. I mean, it might help with a cold, but with spiritual things, it has to be a spiritual thing, right? Okay, so back here. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5. And Peter is giving us instructions. And it says in verse 6, it says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. Resist him, standing firm in the faith, because you know the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. Here's a couple things, and I'm going to try and bring all this together. First off, it says that we're supposed to humble ourselves. I've heard so many people say, God is humbling me. And I don't think that's true. I think circumstances may offer you the opportunity to be humbled, but you can harden yourself under pressure, or you can surrender and humble yourself to what God is doing. So number one, we get to humble ourselves because under God's mighty hand, he lifts you up. So it's not about getting tougher so I can strive and pull myself up. No, it's about surrendering in humbleness, humility, confessing you have coffee on your shirt, humility, right? Humility. And then cast your anxiety. How many of us, myself included, I'm going to put my hand up first. How many of us every morning wake up and pick up a bag of anxieties as if that was my duty for the day? Yeah. I get out of bed, put my slippers on, and go pick up the anxiety. Well, I guess I got to do this today. As if I could change one single thing on this whole earth without God. And it says cast off. That word cast off is literally throw it off. Throw off the anxieties. Why? Because you got to be alert. You have to be looking. Because there is a roaming lion looking for opportunity. His roar is not his attack. His roar is to see if he gets a response out of you. If you acquiesce, if you give in to the fear of the lion's roar, as a little kid, I can still remember that feeling. It was shaking my body, literally. If we give in to that anxiety, if we start picking that up one more time, we then give opportunity for that enemy to move against you. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole teaching. I have 15 minutes, and no way am I going to be able to really explain possession, oppression, and just being basically bothered by evil spirits. But it's real. Again, not to live in fear, because you are more than an overcomer, and the Spirit of God is within you. If you humble yourself before God, casting off fear, anxieties, that this is not going to move me, then the roar of your finances will not shake you. The roar of the pressure of work and what you have to perform won't move you. The roar of relationships and the demands that it's requiring of you no longer has that pull to make you run in the wrong direction. Coming to God, surrendering these things. I made this note as I was in worship because it just came to me. I'm like, wow, that's so true and so powerful. I've watched enough geographic shows to know that the enemies, the cougar, the lion, the whatever it is that are chasing the animals, the antelopes, it's always the antelopes, right? Those poor antelopes, always on the run. The cheetahs are chasing them, the lions are chasing them, but the thing is, they always tell you they try to separate one away from the rest of the herd because now it's vulnerable and it's easy for attack, and then they all come and consume that poor antelope, right? So no matter how fast it is, it's alone. I would like to encourage you, for lack of better words, get yourself into a small group. Get connected to people. Maybe online, there's reasons and there's purposes why you're at home watching, but get connected to people. Make a comment within the apps so that you can interact with other people. But don't be alone, because it does make you a targeted prey. So, here's my question for you. And what we're doing, those of you who haven't been here yet on a Sunday, and we're now at the end of these, but we're doing shorter messages to give everybody an opportunity to share and answer a question in groups of 2 or 3. So we're going to put this question up on the screen. And those of you that are online, I invite you to be a part of this as well. Please interact. Make your comments be known. Get on the phone and talk to somebody. But here's the question I have for you, and I would love for you, please, again, I already talked about being alone, right? Don't make me say it 2 times. Okay, so here's the question. Where in my life have I allowed the roar of the enemy to overwhelm or consume my thoughts and decisions rather than trusting God? And how, who, what, or where can you connect back to God's protection? Ready? Go. Bless you guys.
Good morning, Humanity Church. Hopefully you're having some really meaningful conversations. Let's come back together, and we're going to have our very last conversation in this series for the summer. Bummer, I know. It's been so rich. Before we jump into this conversation, I want to give you a preview for next week, which I did last week as well. We are starting a brand new series next week called Influencers, which is very exciting. We're going through actually one chapter in the scriptures, Hebrews 11. And if you know anything about it, it's called the Hall of Faith. And we're going to be engaging about 9 weeks in this one chapter. I know for some of you that's like exciting. For some of you think that's boring. I guarantee you this series is going to be thrilling. And here's what I'm asking for us in the next 8 weeks is that I know summer's been here and everyone's had plans, but Labor Day is coming up this weekend, and we're using September 3rd as like a, hey, we're back week. And so I'm gonna ask you to make that weekend like, hey, we're back together, call up some friends that you haven't been with for a while. This is gonna be a dynamic conversation around what it means to use the influence that we've been given and to also notice what is influencing our lives. And it's gonna be a powerful, powerful 9-week conversation around what it means to use our influence and to be influenced in that. So we have some surprises along the way. I can't wait to tell you about them or show you them, but we'll have to go from there. So, last conversation here in our zoo theology. We've had all kinds of conversations about all kinds of animals over the last few weeks, from bears to fish to donkeys to lions to lambs to even leeches along the way. And it has been a surprisingly meaningful series, taking a look at what it looks like to engage these metaphors around our faith and to become people who are dynamic. We've looked at everything from our work ethic to overcoming fear to not allowing circumstances to determine who we are and where we're moving and how we're living. And in all the animals that we've talked about, there is one that we've yet to talk about. And it's the animal that is actually like the crowning jewel of creation. It's the one that literature and art and philosophy have been written about and engaged in. It's the one that is called the masterpiece of God. It's the one that is to literally die for, and that is us humans. You know, I know we don't like to think of ourselves as animals. We like to think of ourselves as much more sophisticated than that. But, you know, they don't actually lock us up in the zoo to look at humans. We go to the zoo to look at animals. Maybe that's what politics are. You know, we lock up some politics in there and we engage them over there. But for most part, we do not like to think of ourselves as animals. We think of ourselves as more than that. My grandfather has informed us that when he dies, his body will be donated to science, and that within 24 hours of his passing, he will be whisked away to some laboratory, and for the next 18 months, they will cut him open and dissect him like a frog in a 7th grade class. And they'll be examining all kinds of his organs, and they'll rip open his legs and see all the tendons there, and they'll crack open his skull and pull out his brain and take a look at how that works. Now, if you're anything like me, this conversation is very disturbing to think about, because we don't like to think of ourselves like an earthworm that's being dissected by 4th graders in a classroom. But we all know that there's a part of us that are animals, that there's like a biology to us, and that's why we're in the animal kingdom. And we know that there's a part of that, but we don't like looking at ourselves like that. We like to believe that there's an elevated part of us. But the reality is we like the fact that there's an animalistic part of us when it comes to medicine. We like to be able to study that when we put this chemical in the body, this happens, and when we're able to do this is how our body responds. And so we like that part of us. But I think we recognize that while we are a part of the order of the animal kingdom, that there is something that separates us from a lion or a fish or a donkey or a bear in the middle of it. And so today we're technically, I guess, going to move from zoology to anthropology, or maybe somewhere in between in our conversation today. When I was writing this conversation, I was at Landmark Coffee in Redlands, and there's this couple that was next to us, and I realized rather quickly that they were pastors having a conversation about what's next for their church. And so I was eavesdropping while I was thinking about this conversation around what it means to be human. And ironically, they were talking about what is needed to communicate to their community. And the man said, you know, what we really need, what the church really needs is a clear anthropology. And I was with him on that. He was basically saying, look, we need to understand who humanity is, what our place is, and how we are to see ourselves, and that will inform us of how we see God. And I'm like, I'm with you, brother. I'm sipping my latte and listen along as he's going. And then he said this, and this is where he lost me. He said, the most important thing that we can understand about ourselves is that we are completely depraved and that we are extremely broken, and that when we fully grasp that reality, everything else falls into place. And I thought to myself, and I thought, I halfway agree with you. It's interesting to me that there's this need within spiritual leaders to constantly remind people of our depravity, of our brokenness. See, because from my perspective, that's obvious. See, I actually think it takes a lot more faith from us to believe that we are inherently good, beautiful, put together beings that have momentary blips of evil that comes out of us. I think it takes a lot more faith to believe that than it takes to believe that there's a brokenness to our spirituality and that we are fighting to get to this space of goodness. And so it doesn't occur to me that I need to constantly be reminding people about this. When I look out at the world, I'm having conversations around why people are anxious and why people are depressed and why people are overwhelmed by their circumstances and why they feel powerless and why their mindsets aren't working in their current situations. I'm having conversations to help people return to their goodness, not necessarily to deal with the momentary blips on the radar of what's not working in their life. If anything, it should be that we are obviously utterly corrupt and that something is missing in the middle of this. But it's so fascinating to me that followers of Jesus think that if we just remind ourselves of our wickedness and we make sure that we know that we're corrupt and we allow this to inform our anthropology, that will move us forward rather than getting crystal clear about our original design, rather than being fascinated and overwhelmed and curious about why we as a species were even created in the first place. I think that's actually a much more exciting conversation, because our brokenness might be a part of our current narrative, but it hasn't always been that way. And going back to the original design actually gives us an insight as to what we were made for, and more importantly, who we were made for. In Hebrews chapter 2, starting in verse 5, it says this, and this is an anthropology of humanity in here. It says, "It is not to the angels that he has subjected the world to come, about which we are speaking. There is a place where someone has testified, what is man that you, God, are mindful of them? A son of man that you care for him. You made him a little lower than the angels. You crowned them with glory and honor and put everything under their feet." The writer in Hebrews here is quoting David from Psalms 8, and David is looking out at the universe, and he's looking at the sun and the stars, and he's looking out at creation and all of the beauty that's around him, and he says, when I look out at everything that you've created, it's so breathtaking. There's so much diversity and color and interesting dynamics that take place in creation. And he's in marvel of everything that he is experiencing around him. And then he says, what is man that you would choose to be mindful of us? Of all of the beauty that God could spend his time with, of all of the breathtaking locations that God could spend his energy on, of all the universal beauty that he could engage in on a regular basis, he inclines himself to us, that the energy of God would be spent with humanity, which says a lot about who we are, but it actually says a lot about who God is in the first place. I love working with artists, and one of the things that's so fun about working with artists is that you can actually get a glimpse into their soul based on the art that they create. You can actually take a look at the works of art, whether it's a film or something on canvas or a spoken word, and you get a glimpse into that artist's soul in the middle of that. And God decided when he was gonna make human beings as the master artist, that he was gonna make us just a little lower than angels. That he would place us just a little bit lower than the warriors of heaven. But then on top of that, he would crown us with glory. And he would crown us with honor, and then he would put everything under our feet. See, it says in this passage as it continues, in putting everything under them, God left nothing that is not subject to them. That there is nothing in this world that is not subject to us as human beings. It says that of all the species on the planet that gets to control everything, it's us. And that he has placed everything under our feet, that everything is subject to us. And that should inform how we relate to our resources, how we engage one another, how we relate to our character, the future of ourselves and humanity and the world. When there is nothing not subject to us, that there's some power that comes with this. Now, here's the thing though. Have you ever had someone who says something inspiring and you get all amped up and you're ready to go and then you know it's not quite true? You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes I listen to these motivational speakers and I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And then I get done and I'm like, that doesn't actually make sense at all, you know? Or I just look out at my life and I'm like, yeah, that's categorically not true, you know, with that. And I mean, you see this all over memes on the internet. It is just a common thing and people get really inspired by them. Like these posts are like, you are enough, right? And just believe it. And then have you ever tried to do life alone and just believing that you're enough? It actually doesn't work very well. Or when people say, don't care what other people think, just care about who you are and living your authentic self. I don't know if you've ever been married, but not caring what another person thinks doesn't actually work. In actually any relationship that we find ourselves in. Or like these wonderful phrases that sound good, like you are the master of your universe until you have to pay those bills, right? And then you realize, no, actually the credit card company is the master of my universe and I am just here to engage it. But I find that Christians actually are kind of the worst at this. That we say things all the time that sound good, that even sound biblical, and then we find ourselves struggling to keep up with the phrases and the platitudes that we engage in on a regular basis. See, do you ever feel like you were made for more and you just don't know how to access it? See, I love that this says that everything in the universe is subject to you. That there is nothing in the created order that is not under your feet. I think every single one of us, we resonate with that. We long for it to be true, at least. We listen to that, we think that this has to be, that there has to be a space where I master my world and I have a mastery of the things that I'm engaging in and the things that are coming at me, and yet I don't actually know how to do that. I don't know how to access that type of power or that type of influence or that type of glory in my life. This is such a common thing for me. That it's so annoying to have a dream or an image of what the future could look like and then not be able to engage it fully. It's annoying, isn't it, to know what your marriage could be or what your parenting could be or what your dynamic in relationships could be or what your career could be or what your financial situation could be, and then not know how to access it and then being told everything's under your feet and nothing is not subject to you. It's frustrating, isn't it? Because it's like, which one is true in the middle of this? And we all know that there is more beauty to bring into the world, both externally and internally. But we struggle with how to actually realize this power that the scriptures at least say God has placed inside of us. We know we were made to have mastery over our lives and to simultaneously be a masterpiece in the world around us. But it drives us crazy not knowing how to get there, to step into that space. See, if everything is subject to me, why isn't everything subject to me? And this is what the book continues with, because I think we like to stay there. Everything's under our feet, and everything is subject to us. Put that on a Bible cover, right? Shout that out in the middle of a worship service. But then it continues, yet at present we do not see everything subject to them. Thank you, right? But we do see Jesus, who is made lower than the angels for a little while, now crowned with glory and honor because he suffered death, so that by the grace of God, he might taste death for everyone. In bringing many sons and daughters to glory, it was fitting that God, for whom through and for everything exists, should make the pioneer of their salvation perfect through what he suffered. Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters. He says, I will declare your name to my brothers and sisters in the assembly. I will sing your praises. And again, I will put my trust in him. And again, he says, here am I and the children God has given me. See, when God looks out at humanity, his anthropology is not informed by our brokenness. God's anthropology is actually not informed by how depraved we are. It's actually informed by how much he longs for us to be in family with him. That's actually what informs his anthropology. It is not that our spiritual brokenness doesn't matter. That's not the conversation. It just doesn't seem like that's the driving motivator behind how God views humanity and how he interacts with us and our original design. See, in this, God decided that he would translate himself into human form. That of all the animals that God could translate himself into, he chooses us. God doesn't come as a giant elephant or a salamander or a dog. He doesn't come as any other of the created order or any other part of the animal kingdom. He comes as a human being. This is how much he longed for us to return to our place as family with him. Because while you can love a puppy or a cat or a fish, only humans were crowned with glory and honor. Only humans were given a space where everything was subject to them, made just a little lower than the angels. So it would make sense that when God says, how do I translate myself so that we can become family again, so that we can return humanity to its original design, it would make sense that he would come as human so that he could fully express his defining characteristic of love and family towards us. That he would endure the cross to restore us to the original design of being fully human. Restore us to our original design of being gloriously human, crowned with honor. See, this is the crazy part of this. In restoring humanity to our original design, the one through whom everything was created for and through God himself, when he comes to restore us to our original design, he doesn't say, now I tolerate you. But I think so many of us actually live with that theology. I think even people who don't know God live with that theology. That the best that we can do is get to a place where God tolerates us. That the best we can do is get to a place where he says, all right, I'll deal with you now. But the beautiful thing is that he says, the one who made you holy is now family with you. That you are now brothers and sisters. And in the family, notice that you're not like the estranged cousin that occasionally gets invited to Thanksgiving, right? You're not like the weird uncle who's like, do they have to come? You're actually invited to be siblings with Jesus himself, to be connected into the family. He says, the one who made you holy and you who are made holy are now family with one another. You are brothers and sisters in Jesus. There's a certain pride that comes with a family name that is honorable or that has some weight to it. I remember as a kid not understanding the full influence that my grandfather had growing up, that he's a bit of an iconoclast in his generation for the movement of Jesus. And I knew that he would go and he would speak to thousands of people in different stadiums and that he influenced large movements around the globe. He was just popo to me. And I remember one time he invited me on a trip to go to Brazil with him, and we showed up to this large auditorium filled with hundreds of people waiting to hear him speak. I didn't think much of it until he got up on stage, and everyone was wearing name tags, and I had a name tag on that had Nathan Neighbor on it, given that it was a name tag. And I didn't think much of my name tag until people started coming up to me and looking at the name tag and saying, "Are you related to Ralph Neighbor?" I'm like, "Yes, why?" And they're like, "Oh, you're part of the family." And more people started coming up to me. Are you like in the neighbor's neighbor? Yeah, I am. And it moved from a last name to a badge of honor that I wore because there was some weight that came with the name. There was some history that came with the name. There was some honor and glory that came with the name. And so I started carrying the name, lifting my head up. Like, no, look, I'm a neighbor, guys, right? In case you didn't notice. And there was some honor and some glory that came, not because of anything that I had done in that place, but because I carried a name. I was part of the family in the middle of this. See, because when your origin is powerful, you become powerful. And what Jesus invites us into is a family name that is trustworthy and that is true and that is faithful and that is honorable in the middle of it. So it shouldn't be a surprise that when we recognize the anthropology that God lives in, that you, human, are a masterpiece, that you were created by him, made just a little bit lower than the angels, that you were crowned with glory and honor, that he puts everything under our feet, that you would wear this name with honor and with pride and with a sense of power that comes along with the name that is above all names, and that you would recognize it among brothers and sisters in this space. But here's the thing, it all starts with Jesus. That this anthropology doesn't actually make sense until it starts with the one who came before us, the first of us, Jesus. See, this new anthropology, it's different from a motivational speech that just says, you are awesome and you are a masterpiece. It actually starts with recognizing, no, there is actually like a deep brokenness that lives within inside of us. That there is a wounding in our own spirituality, but it recognizes that there is a God whose anthropology is about restoring you to your original design, and that he has come for you to redeem all of that, and his name is Jesus. That when we connect to a relationship with him, he is the one that comes and not only makes us family, but allows us to step into our original design, putting everything under our feet because everything is under his feet. So, yes, without Jesus, our anthropology is pretty bleak. It is actually pretty dark. It is actually pretty hopeless. We are actually stuck in our darkness and our corruption and our hopelessness. We are orphaned because of that. And here's why this matters so much to God, because he is not interested in just mitigating the effects of your brokenness. He is interested in returning you to a place of glory and honor as you were created to be. I remember when Jackson was about 4 years old, he was doing some homework and I walked in and I could tell he was frustrated. And I just sat with him and I said, hey, what's going on, bud? And these words came just echoing out of him. He said, I'm so stupid. And in that moment as a father, I was like, nope, we are not starting this. We are not doing this. And we had a long conversation and went through a whole season of working that thought pattern out of him. But here's my come from as a father. I was not just interested in him no longer saying that he was stupid. I was no longer interested in just removing that idea from his mindset. What I was more interested in is him recognizing you are brilliant, that you are gifted and talented, and that you, because you are my son, have honor in this house. And you will not speak that way about your design as long as you are a part of this family. And this is what God invites us into, that with Jesus, he changes the narrative that we live in. That he is not interested in just getting rid of, just getting us to a place where we can say, I'm no longer broken. He wants to move us to a space where we can own the family name of Jesus with honor and glory and return us to a place where everything is under our feet because everything is under his feet in the middle of this. Oh, and by the way, this should absolutely transform not just how we see ourselves, but this should transform how we see every single other human being on the planet. That this anthropology should transform how you see not just your family, but the person serving you coffee, your Uber driver, the person that you walk across the street. That when we, as brothers and sisters of Jesus himself, made just a little lower than the angels, crowned with glory and honor, everything put under our feet, that when we walk out into the world, we should be overwhelmed with the potential of humanity that lives around us. When they step into connection with Jesus, it should transform the lens that we see one another through, moving alongside Jesus to transform the original design of humanity and all of creation with this. Because there is a big difference between seeing Jesus as working to mitigate the effects of our brokenness and seeing Jesus as returning the creation to the original design. One's an anthropology that focuses on simply cleaning up the mess. The other is an anthropology of restoring everything that was lost. And he does that with us. And then part of our glory and honor that he invites us into, the part of us that he invites us into making everything subject to us under our feet, is that we get to partner with him in restoring and redeeming humanity around us back to its original design. That's part of what makes you glorious. That's part of what makes you honorable. That is the part of you that everything gets put under your feet. And Jesus is up to a lot of things with birds and fish and leeches and dogs. But his masterpiece is in you and me, restoring us through Jesus to the original design that he has for us. So I don't want to ask you a question today. I'd like for you just to pause for a moment and just close your eyes where you're at. And I want to give you just a moment to ask Jesus this question silently to yourself. Not to anyone else, because there's only one voice that can answer this question. I'd like for you to just ask Jesus, who am I? Who have you created me to be? What is the view of me, Jesus, that you live in, that you're inviting me into? Beyond all the self-talk and the self-deprivation or shame or worry, wondering, is everything under my feet? Who has he called you to be? Just allow his voice to inform your identity today. And I'm going to ask you to take whatever he has spoken to you and to allow that to just penetrate deep into your soul. That it would become like the driving force for you this week. Because I know it is his driving force of love and mercy and honor and grace and hope and glory over your life because of it. That he would go to the cross for you so that you could be restored to your original design as masterpieces filled with glory and honor. And this morning, if you're here in this space or if you're online and you have not yet connected to a relationship with Jesus, this is your moment. Because it doesn't matter what I say, it actually matters what he says. And what he says is that if you come to him, if you confess with your mouth that he is Lord and believe that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved into and back into your original design. That he will return you, redeem you back into the glorious human that you were made to be for him. And so this morning, if you're here and you've not yet made a decision to follow Jesus, or if you're here and maybe you have wandered way far away from that original design in him, this is a moment where I believe Jesus wants to restore everything that was lost and to return you to what it means to be gloriously human because of him and his work. So if that's you today, I'd like for you to, just, if you're here in this room, you can just look up at me. You're saying, today I want to connect to Jesus for the first time or for the first time in a long time. Yeah. And if you're online, you can just put in the chat, Jesus. We'll know what that means. And I want you to just pray this prayer with me. There's nothing magical about it. There's no magic words. It's just connecting to the Father and just say, dear Jesus, I know that I'm broken, but I know that you came and you died for me. And you came back to life so that I could fully live, so that you could return me to my original design of what it means to be fully human. So I make you Lord, and I follow you today with everything that is in me. I give you my life, and I know that we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.